Hey guys, welcome back to the Jake Ellenbogen YouTube channel. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. Guys, we have something different today. I've been doing a lot of Rams content, and I do want to get back to really just distributing all across sports. I still can't seem to leave the NFL right now. It is NFL season, and to be honest, it's becoming more of an NFL channel. But I have to discuss something that is definitely on my mind and is definitely, in the news, and that is a bunch of things. But regardless, it's the head coaching candidates. Now, right now, there's about 7 head coaching candidates. You have seven, not candidates, but rather teams looking for a coach. And most recently, surprisingly, actually, one of them became Doug Peterson, which, he ends up getting fired. Now that I'm recording this, it's the same day he got fired. So the Eagles are now an option. So now you have 7 teams with vacancies across the board. The Jaguars likely to get Trevor Lawrence at number 1 overall. The Chargers have probably the best franchise quarterback, or one of the best franchise quarterbacks remaining out of the vacancies, in Justin Herbert. And I think they have the most complete team as far as, this is a team that maybe you go in there and, you get a coach that can obviously do their thing. Maybe they already have experience, and this team could be fighting for a playoff spot next year. The Jets, the Jets have a franchise quarterback potentially in Sam Darnold, but they also have the 2nd overall pick if you don't like Darnold. The Falcons have Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. So, they have a lot of weapons there. Plus, they have guys on the other side, Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones. And then the Lions, who have Matthew Stafford. We're not really sure if Matthew Stafford will be a Lion or not, but they do have Matthew Stafford. They do have guys like Kenny Golladay, and of course, they draft Jeff Okudah in this past draft. And then the Texans, not the most viable option, I would say. I'd probably say they're the least viable option, probably the least attractive option. And, you have coaching candidates that are turning down, interviewing with that team. So it's definitely interesting there and something to keep in mind. But what I will say is that you do have Deshaun Watson, and you obviously have other guys as well. But Deshaun Watson is a big key to that team's success. And then, going back to the Eagles, you have Wentz, you have Hurts, you have Miles Sanders, and then, you have a pretty loaded defense. So, at the end of the day, I mean, this could work out. I think the worst coaching job is the Texans, as great as Deshaun Watson is. I don't even know if he's going to play for them. We've already done a video on that. So that's just, those are the vacancies. So let's get into the coaches, because this is the episode, this is the show, this is the video that you want to watch if you want to get all the knowledge, if you want to start really being able to talk at the virtual water cooler on Zoom, assuming everybody's still working from home. You want to be able to talk to people about these head coaching candidates. And if you're a Jets fan, a Falcons fan, a Jaguars fan, any of the, fans of teams, any of the teams that I've literally listed, then you'll be interested in this. So we'll start off right off the cuff. We're going to start off with probably the biggest name, the guy I hear the most of, and some controversial, stuff about Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is a former second round pick out of Colorado. He played in the NFL with the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Eagles. He started off as a running backs coach when in his coaching career at Colorado, went to UCLA, then the Vikings, became the assistant head coach with the Vikings, then went back to Colorado, and then eventually found his way to the Kansas City Chiefs as the running backs coach from 2013 to 2017, and then eventually took over for Matt Nagy in 2018 as the offensive coordinator, and he's been that ever since. He's a Super Bowl champion, obviously, as of, last year. And he's a national champion. He won a college title in 1990. So Heisman Trophy finalist, has a lot of history there, of course. Now, the interesting thing with Bieniemy is that he comes from Andy Reid's coaching tree, the same coaching tree with Doug Peterson and, of course, Matt Nagy. Doug Peterson was just fired, but he won a Super Bowl in 2017. And Matt Nagy, of course, has led his team to the playoffs twice with the Chicago Bears. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. Now, do I think Eric Bieniemy can come in and be a head coach in this league? Absolutely. I do think he has talent. I think there's actually, at first, I felt like there wasn't a lot of options. Now that I've gone through and I've really done my homework, there are a ton of names. And we're going to go through all of them. I don't even know how long this video is going to be as I'm recording this. But it'll be worth it. Trust me. If you want to know more about these coordinators, we'll do other coaches as well, maybe former head coaches. A lot of names are coming up. You're going to want to write these down or make mental notes. But look, Patrick Mahomes became the second quarterback in NFL history, along with Peyton Manning, to throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in a season. That happened with Bieniemy as the OC. So obviously, with the Chiefs, the way they've been scoring, Bieniemy is somebody that, he also, let's not forget, he called the plays in the Super Bowl that, they beat the 49ers 31-20 last year. And I think Bieniemy could get a job, but he's been interviewing poorly per reports. So that's an interesting thing and something to keep in mind. But I do think that, he's one of the top candidates, and that's a guy to watch out for, Eric Bieniemy. Moving on, we have Brian Daboll. Now, he's been around a little bit. He is the Bills' OC. Bills, of course, are one of the top teams in the league right now in offensive statistics. This is somebody that comes from the University of Rochester, so he is, a relative... I wouldn't say New Yorker because he was born in Ontario, Canada, but he's been around. William Mary, Michigan State, New England Patriots, the New York Jets, Cleveland Browns, Miami Dolphins, Kansas City, as the offensive coordinator in 2012, and then you had the Patriots again as a tight ends coach for 3 years, and then he went to Alabama. Was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach in 2017 and has been with the Bills since 2018. And he is a 5-time Super Bowl champion, and he has won a college football playoff national title with Alabama. So, interestingly enough, Brian Daboll has really turned this team around in this season. I mean, he is somebody that was already on the radar for a while. But with what he's been able to do for Josh Allen, what he's been able to do with Stephon Diggs in this offense, he has really turned the Bills from, for the most part, they've been a defensive-minded football team since the days of Jim Kelly and, Thurman Thomas. He's turned them into an offensive-minded football team, and they're an explosive team. Again, Josh Allen with just an incredible season, for the Bills. So, I mean, he's somebody who, if you're looking for a offensive mind to be your head coach, he has to be one of the top guys as well as Bieniemy. So I definitely think that's somebody to keep in mind. Also forgot to mention that he is 45 years old, so he's not an older guy by any stretch, and Eric Bieniemy is 51. So you do have that age difference, and I think they're both deserving of jobs, but definitely, right now Brian Daboll might even be the favorite of anyone. On to the next, Arthur Smith. Let's talk a little bit about what he's done, and look. We're talking the first two guys, they're still in the playoffs. Arthur Smith's team did lose. He did call a relatively, I would say, conservative game against the Ravens, which ultimately I think cost them the game. But I'm not worried because I want a guy that is going to have success, consistency, and Arthur Smith has done that. Look, he was obviously a North Carolina graduate. He was an assistant. He goes to the Redskins at the time, defensive quality assistant, goes to Ole Miss as a defensive intern, and then goes to the Titans and really works his way up the rungs. Defensive quality control coach, offensive quality control coach, offensive line and tight ends assistant, assistant tight ends coach, and then eventually offensive coordinator in 2019. And he for Matt LaFleur when he went over to the Green Bay Packers. So I really do like Arthur Smith, and it really shows you how big of an impact he had on guys like Jonnu Smith and Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown and just this offense in general. I mean, this is the highest scoring Titans team in 16 years, and that is Arthur Smith's doing. Matt LaFleur honestly wasn't as impressive as I expected him to be with the Titans, but as soon as Arthur Smith took over, he was actually more impressive. And it says a lot because Matt LaFleur took over a Packers team that didn't even make the playoffs and turned them into a 13-3 ball club. So let's not act like, he's a nobody. Arthur Smith and co. Really did a nice job. They kind of... they did a nice job of getting to the AFC title game. They were really impressive. The Titans had a little bit of a Cinderella run, and I think a lot of that came down to Arthur Smith. So if you're looking for another offensive-minded coach, Arthur Smith at 38 years old might actually be on top of that, especially with the age. I think 38 is a really good age. It's right around when Kyle Shanahan got his opportunity. So this is definitely a good option there. Moving on, though, we have a guy that's a lot younger, and I don't really care. Here's the thing. I've already seen Sean McVay at 30 years old get a head coaching gig and do nothing but change the culture of a team that was 4-12 the year prior and couldn't get over the 500 hump. Ever since then, Sean McVay of the LA Rams has gone 11-5, 13-3, 9-7, and 10-6. So I'm not worried about the age. If a guy has it, he has it. This is the most interesting name, or at least one of them, on the entire list for me, and that is Joe Brady. If you know who Joe Brady is, it's probably not a shock. He comes from William & Mary College, and he also went to Penn State. He's 31 years old. He was a coach at William & Mary, linebackers coach, a graduate assistant at Penn State. He was with the New Orleans Saints as an offensive assistant, but from 2017 to 2018. But then he went to LSU in 2019 as the passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach, and he did wonders, absolute wonders, for Joe Burrow and company. They won a national title. And when he left, and of course other guys left as well, but LSU was not the same. He went to Carolina, and actually, I thought he had some success. The stats don't show it because they lost their big-time playmaker, Christian McCaffrey, for pretty much the entirety of the season. But I think he may do. He's a national champion. He's 31. I like the fact he's part of Matt Rule's coaching tree. I like who he's been around. So one of the top assistants in college. I think he's one of the top head coaches. And I will say this, head coaching candidates. I will say this. It doesn't always matter based on what you do as an offensive coordinator. It doesn't always translate to a head coach. People thought Kevin Stefanski was the issue in Minnesota. He leaves Minnesota and sends the Browns to the playoffs, and a playoff win for the first time it's the first road playoff win for the Browns since the 60s. That's something to keep in mind. So I do like Joe Brady. And for a team like, say, the Jets, who have a quarterback who might need some guidance there, I like Joe Brady as that quarterback whisperer type of guy. I think he could really help with that offense. I would probably say the Jets, and I would say it'd be interesting to see him with Herbert. It'd be interesting to see him with Jacksonville and working with Trevor Lawrence. It'd be interesting to see him with the Eagles and maybe working with Jalen Hurts. Joe Brady, I don't know if he'll get hired, but I would definitely hire him if I had, any of those. If I had 7 slots, I think he should get one of them. I'm really high on him. I'm not saying he's the next Sean McVay, but I will say I think he's better than Matt Nagy was as a quarterback or as a head coaching prospect coming out. All right, so moving on. Josh McDaniels. I know we talk about him all the time, but he's 44 years old. He has been a head coach before. He's been an offensive coordinator for years. So let's go back a sec. He started off as a graduate assistant at Michigan State. He went to college at John Carroll. Was a personal assistant for the Patriots in 2001. Defensive assistant 2002 to 2003, quarterbacks coach in 2004, became the offensive coordinator in 2005 through 2008, and then became the head coach of the Denver Broncos in 2009. And at that point, I believe he was the youngest coach in NFL history. And then he became the Rams offensive coordinator after the Denver Broncos fired him. Unfortunately, that was kind of just a year where nothing went right, so he went back to the New England Patriots as the offensive coordinator from 2012 to 2019 and had a really odd thing happen where he agreed to be the Indianapolis Colts head coach and during that time, and for whatever reason, it fell through. He decided not to, but he'd already taken over some of the coaches from the New England Patriots staff and sent them over to Indy and just kind of left them there. So like Eberflus, I believe, is one of those guys where, he picked him as his defensive coordinator and kind of left him in Indy. And we'll talk about him a little bit later, but it is very interesting there. He has won 6 Super Bowls. He has a head coaching record of 11-17. So, does he deserve another opportunity? I do think so at some point. He's only 44 and has a ridiculous amount of coaching experience. I just think really at the end of the day, leaving the Colts the way he did, I just think set a bad message to everyone. And I don't know if he will get another opportunity. He might, but that was really not a good look set by McDaniels, and I'm sure the Colts would never bother hiring him again if it came down to it. Here's an interesting name, though. 34 years old. You may have heard of him. You may not have. He's the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans and the quarterbacks coach, Tim Kelly. Look, I'm not saying that this guy is, again, the next Sean McVay, but I've been pretty impressed with Tim Kelly, especially the fact, another guy that's worked his way up the rungs. Starts at Illinois Wesleyan University as a graduate assistant, Minnesota State Moorhead as a defensive coordinator, defensive line coach, goes to Ball State as a graduate assistant, Penn State as a graduate assistant, and then goes to the Texans. And again, you see it, offensive quality control coach from 2014 to 2015. Then he goes to 2016 as offensive quality control coach and takes on the assistant offensive line coach role. He becomes the tight ends coach in 2017 and 18, and then eventually in 2019 he becomes the offensive coordinator. And in 2020, they give him the nod as the quarterbacks coach in addition to the offensive coordinator role in this season. So this is somebody I do like. I think he's somebody that could be something in this league. Tim Kelly's young. He is somebody that was brought in by Bill O'Brien. You can obviously tell because when you're talking about the Penn State pedigree, that's where you get that from. So 34 years old. It's definitely an interesting one there. Now, I will say this. Deshaun Watson does not want to lose him. And if Deshaun Watson is advocating for Tim Kelly's probably pretty good at his job. Now, look, the Houston Texans really weren't, I wouldn't say they were horrible. It's really weird to me because Houston's offense still moved the ball. They still put up points. And so I guess that's kind of the weird thing with that. When you look at that, I mean, I think Tim Kelly did really a really nice job this season for sure. This team they were 13th in yards, offensive yards. So a team that's picking third, of course they won't get that pick. they were 13 in offensive yards. They didn't really run the ball well, but they were 8th in the league in touchdown passes, 4th in the league in passing yards. So, yeah, I can definitely see why a Deshaun Watson would want to keep Tim Kelly. If he leaves, I don't even know why Deshaun Watson would stay there. I think he's probably going to force a trade. So I do like Tim Kelly. If you're willing to go out and get a young guy, a guy that no one's talking about, that's a guy that you might want to consider as a head coach. I know it might be a little too early, but it does say a lot that Deshaun Watson doesn't want to see him go. So here's one, as we kind of talked about a little bit of the younger guys. This guy's a little older, 48 years old, Greg Roman. Roman's been around the league a little bit. John Carroll College. He's a Carolina Panthers offensive line assistant from 95 to 2001. Houston Texans from 2002 to 2005. He was with the Ravens from 2006 to 2007 as an offensive line assistant. Holy Spirit High School, he was the offensive coordinator in 2008. Then he becomes the tight ends coach and offensive tackles coach at Stanford, and then becomes, as you well know, the famous offensive coordinator for Colin Kaepernick's success with the San Francisco 49ers, goes to the Buffalo Bills and has some success with Tyrod Taylor, and then he comes to the Ravens as a senior offensive assistant and tight ends coach, eventually molds his way into the offensive coordinator role, and he starts to work hands-on with Lamar Jackson. He becomes the offensive coordinator last year, and that is the year Lamar Jackson became the MVP in the NFL. He was the AP NFL Assistant Coach of the Year in 2019. So he is well respected. Greg Roman has been doing a nice job with this run game. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is somebody that wants to throw the ball because they're 32nd in the league in passing yards, but they're first in rushing attempts, rushing yards, third in the league in rushing touchdowns, and first in the league in yards per attempt. So Greg Roman knows what he's doing. If you have a team that has a defense, but you want a coach that's going to come in and is going to be able to, basically get your team to run the football and run it well, Greg Roman might not be a bad option. And especially with all the mobile quarterbacks coming out of this draft, it might be an interesting option for, say, Jacksonville to do that with Trevor Lawrence, or the New York Jets to do that if they decide to go out and get Fields, or even the Falcons if they get Trey Lance. So he's an interesting one for sure. I don't know if he's my favorite candidate, but I do think Greg Roman deserves some more credit than he really gets. The next is Jason Garrett, and I'm really just not super thrilled with Jason Garrett, to be honest with you. Jason Garrett has a career. I believe his career head-to-head is not very good. We'll just say that. Jason Garrett, at the end of the day, to me, is just not. I don't think he does anything special. And so, for that reason, I'm not exactly willing to make him my head coach. He comes in as the OC for the Giants, and albeit he didn't have Saquon Barkley, sure, but at the end of the day, I'm not really a huge fan of what he did with this offense. I felt like there were pieces there that they could have done something more than what he did. He's a plus 500 coach. I mean, he 85 and 67, so he's not terrible, but here's the problem, though. I see 10-6, 13-3, and 12-4, but then aside from that, it's 8-8, 9-7, 4-12, 8-8, 8-8, 8-8, 5-3. So Jason Garrett really doesn't blow me away by any stretch, and he's 54 years old. I probably would say he's the worst candidate that is on this list from what I've seen so far. That I've made, obviously, that I've told you. There's a lot more coming. But if you're clamoring for Jason Garrett, I don't really know if that's the best idea. Moving on, a more exciting candidate is a former 7th overall pick in 2003 by the Jacksonville Jaguars out of Marshall, Byron Leftwich. Leftwich may not have had the best NFL career. However, he is molding into a pretty decent NFL coach and potential NFL head coach. Right now, he finds himself with the Buccaneers. He actually played with the Buccaneers. He played with the Steelers twice, and he played with the Falcons and, of course, the Jaguars. He started off as a quarterback's coach for the Arizona Cardinals. This is because of the connection to Bruce Arians from the Steelers days. Bruce Arians actually brought him on to his Arizona Cardinals coaching staff as a quarterback's coach. He became the interim offensive coordinator in the next season. And then in 2019, Bruce Arians, when he took over as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, he brought Byron Leftwich. Here's the thing. Bruce Arians clearly sees something in Byron Leftwich. Otherwise, he wouldn't be bringing him around like that. He wouldn't be promoting him. Now, Byron Leftwich isn't, they're not blowing the doors off in Tampa Bay, but they're having a pretty good season on the offensive side of the football. He's done a nice job as an offensive coordinator. It's not the greatest offense of all time, but it's definitely something, and it's shown you that he continues to grow. He continues to produce. So at some point, Byron Leftwich is going to get a head coaching job, or at least some interviews. Does he get it soon? I don't know. I would personally take him over Jason Garrett. Now, interestingly enough, he's 40 years old. Okay? So he is definitely somebody that he doesn't have to get a coaching job right now. He could stick with Bruce Arians maybe another year. Say Tom Brady plays another year with them. He could definitely do that. But right now, it's very interesting because he is somebody that I wouldn't be shocked if he did get a coaching gig. I'm definitely not. I wouldn't say I am, concerned with him ever getting a shot. I think eventually talent is going to find talent, and Byron Leftwich could be an interesting option. Would be really interesting to see if he goes to the Jets. Now, Shane Steichen, I could be pronouncing that wrong. He's the offensive coordinator with the LA Chargers, and he's done such a great job with Justin Herbert, putting him in position to succeed. That offense moves the football. That offense has been scoring. And so I actually really like the idea of Shane Steichen, who is a 35-year-old coach right now, comes from Louisville as an offensive assistant. He was with the San Diego Chargers as a defensive assistant, then the Cleveland Browns, went back to the San Diego Chargers as an offensive quality control coach, and has been with them ever since. He went to the move with the LA Chargers, quarterback coach, eventually interim offensive coordinator last year. Now here he is, offensive coordinator again. And I can't stress it enough. I really think the Chargers are a coach away from, taking it to the next level. And when I look at the Chargers, at least for me, I honestly think promoting from within with Steichen might actually not be a bad option. What you could also do is you could go with an established head coach, and we'll go into it, but there are a few. Doug Peterson just became available, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just going through the offensive coordinator, though, that could potentially be a head coach. I think Steichen definitely deserves his name to be mentioned. There's not a ton else I can add except for just his, resume and what he's done, with Justin Herbert, and I think it was just so impressive from the get-go. He looks so comfortable. He did not look like a rookie at any point this season. Now, here's another name you've probably heard of, and he is 41 years old, pretty young, and his name is Nathaniel Hackett. You've heard him. He's been around the league, the Buffalo Bills, the Jaguars. He was with the Syracuse Orange, Tampa Bay, with Stanford, UC Davis. So, this is somebody that's definitely worked his way up. And now, here's the thing. Nathaniel Hackett is actually having quite the season, with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. I find it really interesting because Nathaniel Hackett was also the offensive coordinator with that Jaguars team that did go to the AFC Championship game. He was let go in 2018 and became the Packers offensive coordinator in 2019. I think he's done a nice job with Green Bay. I do believe that. Of course, you have what I would say I believe is the GOAT in Aaron Rodgers. So it's not like his job is extremely hard, but I think he's done a nice job of putting guys in position to succeed. Quite honestly, I like the way he calls plays for Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. I like that split back look. I like the fact that, he does a really nice job of getting everyone involved, including Robert Tonyan, the tight end, flexing him out wide at times, using him in line. So I think he's creative, and I think he gives something, in that regard to help you out. Now, is he a head coach? I mean, we'll see, but I think his resume, he's done enough to show you he could be a head coach, especially being a coordinator back-to-back seasons, 13-3. So we move on to another guy that comes from Green Bay. And actually, I believe, friend of the podcast, Ben Albright, mentioned that Aaron Rodgers actually started having his relationship fractured with Mike McCarthy once Alex Van Pelt left. Alex Van Pelt leaves in 2017, goes to the Bengals as the quarterback's coach, and he was not with Rodgers in 2018, which was Mike McCarthy's last season with Rodgers. As we know, they went 6-9-1 and didn't make the playoffs. So this is somebody very interesting. He is 50, so he's a little bit older. Former 8th round pick in the 1993 draft out of Pitt. Played for the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Bills. And now Alex Van Pelt, he started off with the Frankfurt Galaxy. Then he goes to the Buffalo Bills, and he's there for quite a while. And then he goes to Tampa Bay as the quarterback's coach, Green Bay as the running back's coach, becomes the quarterback's coach from 2014 to 2017. Cincinnati picks him up as the quarterback's coach 2018-2019, and Cleveland grabs him in 2020 as the offensive coordinator, which is the biggest position he's had since 2009 with the Buffalo Bills. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach. So what can you say? I mean, the offense that the Browns have put together, it's been impressive, and it's also led the Browns to a Super Bowl win with Kevin Stefanski. Alex Van Pelt is well respected, and there's a lot of people that believe that he could be behind the quick turnaround of this offense, putting Baker Mayfield in position to not necessarily fail you, but a chance to maybe win a game, using Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb the way you're supposed to use them, getting both tight ends involved in David Njoku, and of course Austin Hooper, the free agency acquisition. No Odell Beckham Jr., no problem. He's been getting a lot of isolated looks. Jarvis Landry isolating him on linebackers, making them pay. Rashard Higgins. In Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, I've been impressed with the way Van Pelt has called this offense. I think he's done a nice job, and I think he knows what their brand of football is. Now, is Van Pelt a head coach? That remains to be seen. But if he did get some interviews, I wouldn't be surprised, especially as the Browns continue to win. All right, that is it for the offensive coordinators. Now we're in the defensive coordinators. We're going to start off pretty hot. Rams fans aren't going to be happy. Brandon Staley, Rams defensive coordinator, somebody that comes from Dayton and Mercyhurst College. This guy is 38 years old, starts off his coaching career as Northern Illinois' graduate assistant. Then he goes to St. Thomas, Minnesota. Defensive line coach, special teams coach in 2009. Hutchinson Community College, he becomes the associate head coach and defense coordinator from 2010 to 2011. Tennessee, he becomes a graduate assistant in 2012. John Carroll University, 2013. He's a defensive coordinator. James Madison is a defense coordinator, 2014, goes back to John Carroll to reprise the role of defensive coordinator and secondary coach. And then he finds his way to the NFL finally in 2017, joining Vic Fangio's Chicago Bears from 2017 to 2018 as the outside linebackers coach. Fangio loves him so much, he brings him over to Denver Broncos when Fangio gets a head coaching gig. And then, of course, that happens. Sean McVay, we all know what happens there. He hires Brandon Staley to basically take over the reins as the defensive coordinator, taking over for Wade Phillips as the successor. And he turns Wade Phillips' solid defense into the best defense in all of football. So does that mean Brandon Staley can be a head coach? Does that tell you that he can be a leader of men? No, but it does tell you that he can be transformative. It does tell you that a guy like Vic Fangio, who I do think is the best defensive coordinator in all of football, when he is a defensive coordinator, of course, because he's a head coach right now, it does tell you that if that was the guy that he kind of looked at as like his disciple, I mean, I don't know. I feel really good about it. So, obviously, as a Rams fan, I don't want to lose Brandon Staley, but if you're looking for a head coach that is going to obviously have it there with the defense, has experience, and you want to just get a guy that can come in and You give you a legit defense, Brandon Staley's your man. Who would you do this for? Well, you might do it for the Chargers. You might do it for the Jets. You might do it for the Falcons. Well, all three of those teams seem to be interested in him. So interestingly enough, Brandon Staley's getting interest. Will he be a head coach? I did hear on the broadcast, I'm sure as well as many of you did, during the Rams-Seahawks playoff game, Joe Buck did say many around the league believe he's a year away. I don't know if I buy that, but I'm okay with it. I don't want to see Brandon Staley go, and I do imagine that Sean McVay won't block any attempt, unlike other teams, to give him an opportunity to go get that head coaching job. Keep in mind, he loves his spot with the Rams, and it's hard to turn away a team that is right now trying to fight for a Super Bowl. Moving on, though, this one, coached in the Super Bowl, he has the Rams number, and that is Robert Saleh. Saleh is a 41-year-old defensive coordinator, went to college at Northern Michigan, Michigan State defensive assistant, Central Michigan, Georgia, Houston Texans, was there for a while, goes to Seattle Seahawks, then goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars as the linebackers coach from 2014 to 2016, takes over as the 49ers defensive coordinator in 2017 and stays there for the present. He is a Super Bowl champion as well. Now, here's the thing. You have a guy like Robert Saleh, and he's done wonders for this defense. During the 2019 season, the 49ers defense was 6th in the league in forced turnovers with 27, second in total defense, 281.8 yards given up per game, first in pass defense, 169.2 yards per game given up, fourth in sacks with 48. And this is the first time since 2003 that the 49ers finished in the top 10 in both scoring and yards per game. Saleh helped lead this team 13-3 to the Super Bowl, in which they lost to Eric Bieniemy and the Kansas City Chiefs. So Saleh is a guy that's been mentioned quite a bit, and I would imagine he gets a head coaching gig. My money right now would probably be on the Lions. He's getting a lot of response in regards to that, a lot of buzz. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's somebody that gets that gig. Again, he's 41, so this is probably around that time. The 49ers, I think, have some backup to support him. They do have a guy that I do like as the successor that we might talk about a little bit down the road in Chris Kokurik, their defensive line coach, and former linebacker in the NFL, D'Amico Ryans. He's the inside linebackers coach, so two guys to watch out for in replacing him. But, I do like, Robert Saleh as a defensive coordinator. Obviously, he's one of the better defensive coordinators in football. I do like him as a head coaching candidate. And will he get a job? I'm pretty confident in him getting a head coaching gig. What will the 49ers do? I think they'll figure it out. But it's hard to say that Saleh is just kind of just a guy when you see the success that he's had and put players in position to win when they had so many injuries and they continued to fight through it. They didn't make the playoffs, but they won some big games, including two of them against the Rams. Matt Eberflus is next, and he's the Colts defensive coordinator. We mentioned him earlier when he came over for pretty much to come over from the Cowboys as the linebackers coach and passing game coordinator to supposedly join Josh McDaniels. Well, that never happened because Josh McDaniels stayed with the Patriots and he said, goodbye, Eberflus. That is where you're going to sign, all of that, yada, yada. Anyway, Eberflus is 50 years old, so a little bit on the older side, but his time could be coming as a head coach. Toledo, he started at early on in his career from 92 to 2000. Then he went to Missouri as the defensive coordinator from 2001 to 2008. Cleveland Browns, he came into the NFL as the linebackers coach from 2009 to 2010. Dallas Cowboys from 2011 to 2015. He was the linebackers coach, and then he got the passing game coordinator tacked on as well as the linebackers coach from 2016 to 2017. And then he became Indianapolis's defensive coordinator from 2018 to now. And he's done a nice job, I think, with the Colts. Again, Josh McDaniels thought he was going over with him. Doesn't happen. Blows up in his face. They get Frank Reich. Eberflus and Frank Reich didn't really have any sort of meeting or anything like that. But basically, Chris Ballard, the general manager for the Colts, was very quick to basically build Eberflus up and explain to Reich how he really should keep him on his staff, and he was the right guy. And so, really this is somebody that has been well respected around the league, and, a lot of people felt like his time had already come and he should have already been a defensive coordinator, so he had been waiting when he really shouldn't have been. But, this is somebody that had a very good culture that he left behind, with discipline and just a very hard-working individual that a lot of people liked. So the Colts, from 4-12, ended up turning into a 10-6 playoff team and reaching the AFC divisional playoff round. So Eberflus basically took over a defense that was basically the bottom two in the league in the NFL in both scoring and total defense. He turned them around in one season into a top 10 scoring defense and a top 11 total defense. So basically, there wasn't many changes on that defense. There was just poor coaching, and when they added Eberflus, he did his job and turned things around. They were all pretty much the same roster for the most part on the defensive side of the ball. 7 of the 11 defensive starters were the same starters of the season prior. So what did Eberflus do? Well, all he did was continue to pretty much build this team up. They add a guy like Darius Leonard, Anthony Walker, and he turns Darius Leonard into an all-pro. And of course, as you know, the Colts just continue to improve, and they're one of the best defenses in all of football. Now, he actually interviewed with the Cleveland Browns last year and was a finalist for the head coaching job, but they ultimately decided to give it to Kevin Stefanski. This could be it. Now, I don't know if it will or will not be, but, sorry, not Kevin Stefanski. It was Freddie Kitchens. So this will be interesting. Will Eberflus end up with a head coaching gig? I think he's obviously deserving. And I think actually when you look at it, the whole leader of men concept, I think this is somebody that definitely, when he's on the field, he feels like a head coach. All I've heard are good things about him. So I would not be surprised if he ends up getting a job either this year or next year, but he should get a job pretty soon. Moving on, we have a Giants defensive coordinator here in Patrick Graham. I don't think he's getting enough talk. I know he started to get a little buzz towards the end of the year when people started to realize how good the Giants defense really was. And Joe Judge isn't a defensive coordinator. He was essentially the special teams coordinator that they brought over from the Patriots. So now he was a defensive coordinator with the Dolphins. So, okay. Now, Joe Judge is very interesting here because he had already been with the Giants, and then he went to the Packers. Then he goes and he's a coordinator for 1 year with the Dolphins, and then he comes to the Giants as the assistant head coach. Patrick Graham, not Joe Judge. I was totally losing my mind. So yeah, Patrick Graham was working with Brian Flores with the Dolphins in 2019 and took over as the assistant head coach and defensive coordinator with the Giants in 2020. He joined Joe Judge. So interestingly enough, Patrick Graham is 41 years old, not super old there. He does have a playing career. He was an undrafted rookie free agent in 2001 out of Yale. As a coach, he's coached at Wagner, Richmond, Notre Dame, Toledo, with the Patriots for years, the Giants, the Packers, the Dolphins, and then the Giants again. So he goes back to the Giants in his second stint, and he has a bigger role with Joe Judge. This defense was very, very good this year. Very good. The Giants really didn't have much of an offense. And so I mentioned, Jason Garrett earlier, but Jason Garrett, to me, was not what I was impressed by, obviously. They were 31st in the league in scoring. However, Patrick Graham's unit on the defensive side of the ball, they were 9th in the league in scoring defense. Now, they were 5th in passing touchdowns allowed, and they're top 10 rushing defense. Now, with guys like, of course, you have to look at James Bradbury, you have to look at Logan Ryan. They made things happen, but Patrick Graham deserves some credit. And I think he's going to get it. At the end of the day, I do think at some point he's going to get a head coaching job. I don't know if it's this year, but he's a name. As long as he keeps trucking along with that defense and building it up, he's going to be getting a call sooner than later. Now, I'm going to direct you over towards a guy that I don't think is getting any credit that he deserves. I don't think he should have been fired to begin with. I'm a big fan of his. I'm going to say it right now, and he actually has a 93 and 94 head coaching record all time. He's 1-3 in postseason. You know, it doesn't sound all that great. But I'm going to tell you, Jack Del Rio. Jack Del Rio is somebody that I really do like. And I think that, you know, he's been a little disrespected in his days. Now, I'm not saying he's an all-world type of coach by any stretch, because I'm just not saying that. He was with Jacksonville, as we all know. He was with the Denver Broncos as the defensive coordinator, won a Super Bowl with them. He became the head coach of the Raiders from 2015 to 17. Now, with the Raiders, he replaced Dennis Allen. And Dennis Allen, he was somebody, and you'll actually hear his name mentioned at near the end of this, because Dennis Allen, I still think, could be a head coach. I think he became a head coach a little too early, was a little ran over his head, and then Jack Del Rio takes over on a 4-year deal. And, you know, essentially this is somebody who leads the Raiders to a 12-4 record. And they lose in the wild card round to the Texans, and they actually had to start Connor Cook, who I don't even think is in the NFL any longer. They had to start him at quarterback. So I feel like Del Rio was dealt a bad deck of cards to begin with. Because, you know, in his second year with the Raiders, he leads them to the playoffs, 12-4. They lose because Derek Carr has the back injury that we all know. He had like a broken bone in his back. And then they go 6-10 in 2017, and Del Rio gets fired. I didn't agree with it at the time. I still don't. He tried to get the defensive coordinator role with the Bengals, but Zach Taylor decided to hire a different coach who I don't think he was anywhere near as good as Del Rio. I forget who it was. So it was Anarumo, the guy that they got from the Giants. So anyway, we have 2020 coming up, and the Washington football team hire Ron Rivera. And Ron Rivera wants to run a 3-4 scheme, and he decided to bring in Jack Del Rio. Well, here's the thing with that. I've said for a while Jack Del Rio is an underrated coach. Now, don't get me wrong. We can go back to his head coaching days: 5-11, 9-7, 12-4, 8-8, 11-5, 5-11, 7-9, 8-8, 3-8, 7-9, 12-4, 6-10. So he has a negative record. He has a below 500 record, but I still like what I see out of Jack Del Rio. I like him as a coach. He's 57 years old, and you know, I think he really was onto something with the Raiders, but unfortunately was dealt a bad deck. However, control what you can control, right? Well, Washington did just that, and so did Del Rio. Washington football this year, they were a defensive-minded team. It led them to the playoffs. That offense was not going to put up anything. They were 25th in scoring. They were 30th in yards, 28th in passing touchdowns. Like, this team was not going to do much. However, Jack Del Rio's defense was 4th in defensive scoring, 2nd in defensive yards allowed, 2nd in passing defense, then, top 10 rushing. So how did this happen? Well, Jack Del Rio's good. He knows what he's doing. And honestly, I think he needs to start getting more buzz. Look, they went 7-9. It wasn't the greatest year, but they made the playoffs. Jack Del Rio needs to start getting more buzz as a head coach. If we're talking about guys like Marvin Lewis who have never won a playoff game over Jack Del Rio, I don't know if I can agree with that. So that's my plea there, to give Jack Del Rio a shot. I do think Washington football, if they lost him, that defense would take a hit. I think he really helped them out as a play caller this year as a defensive coordinator. Moving on, Don Wink Martindale. Does that name sound familiar? I mean, it should. because he's the defense coordinator for the Ravens and has turned them into a powerhouse since 2018. Wink Martindale is somebody that nobody on the defensive front for the Ravens want to see leave, but he could. He's a little older, 57 years old. Not super old, of course, but he's a little older. He started at Defiance College, coached in Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Western Illinois, Western Kentucky. He went to the Raiders for a few years, defensive coordinator for the Broncos in 2010. And then the Ravens, he just kind of settled down as the linebackers coach from 2012 to 2017, worked his way back up to defensive coordinator, and really thrived. So, Martindale, he's won a Super Bowl with this team, and he's really done a nice job with this defense. The Ravens' defense has been really good this year, and I don't think it's a shock to anybody. They have talent, but Wink Martindale has turned them into the second scoring defense in the league and the seventh in giving up total yards. So this defense is very good. Very good. And that is why they're still in the playoffs. Wink Martindale could end up having a head coaching gig. I know there are some fans out there that do like him, and rightfully so. I think it would make sense to hire somebody like that, a little bit older, give you an authoritative figure, somebody that's really going to add discipline the way that defense is disciplined and get the most out of your players. Could he be a good Jets coach? Potentially. But if you get a guy like Wink Martindale, you would want a guy, like an offensive coordinator. You would want a legitimate offensive coordinator. We'll talk about that. Maybe a Mike Kafka from the Chiefs, quarterback coach. Somebody along those lines. You would want to get a legit offensive mind for the Jets if you got a defensive mind at head coach. Moving on, we have another defensive guy. And speaking of the Jets, he coached the Jets. That's Todd Bowles. Now, Bowles got kind of a raw deal in a sense. Was a former player. Undrafted out of Temple in 1986. Played for the Redskins, the 49ers, and then back to the Redskins. As a coach, he's gone from Morehouse College to Grambling State, to the Jets, to the Browns, to the Cowboys, to the Dolphins, to the Eagles, to the Cardinals. As a defensive coordinator, biggest job of his career. Then became the Jets head coach in 2015 through 2018. And, he didn't do all that well, but I don't know if I entirely agreed with firing him, especially for who they replaced him with Adam Gase. He's now with Tampa Bay, and that defense looks pretty good. No one can run on them. They're also still in the playoffs. Could Todd Bowles get another head coaching job? Bowles is 57 years old, so he is up there in age a little bit. But he's already had that taste. He's 46. He's 26 and 41, so he doesn't have the best record. But it is a question, does he deserve a second chance? I feel like coaching, in a sense, at least head coaching, opportunities, it's kind of like a stock game. If you do well as a head coach, you can stay as a head coach until you don't. When you don't do well, you go back to what got you to the head coaching spot. You go down a rung. Whether it's an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, that's what you do. If you do poorly there, you have to go down to a position coach. At the end of the day, I feel like everybody can coach. It's just a matter of putting them in the right position. Todd Bowles can coach. Is he a head coach? That I don't know. He's done it before, but is it good to hire him as a head coach at this point? Or did we realize that he's just a defensive coordinator and that's what he should stay at? That's the question. Leslie Frazier, Bills defensive coordinator. A little older. He's 61 years old. He was the Vikings head coach, and he's the assistant head coach for the Bills. He's been all over the NFL. Started at Trinity International University as the head coach, University of Illinois, Philly, like with the Eagles, Bengals defensive coordinator, Colts, Vikings, then eventually became the interim head coach, and then they hired him from 2011 to 2013. Became the Buccaneers defensive coordinator from 2014 to 2015. The Ravens brought him on as the secondary coach, and he's been with Buffalo ever since as the defense coordinator from 2017. He's won a Super Bowl as a coach, and he's won a Super Bowl as a player. He is 21, 32-1 as a regular season head coach, and he has one playoff appearance in which Joe Webb was his quarterback, and they went, he's 0-1. So can this guy make it back as a head coach? I don't know, but I will say, the Bills defense, it's definitely something to keep in mind. I don't love going out and getting Leslie Frazier. I don't think that's something that you should 100% do, especially when you look at he really only has one good year out of his 4. He didn't have 4 full years. He started as an interim coach 3-3. The next year 3-13. They hung on to him, and then he goes to 10-6, and then they fire him after going 5-10-1. Some guys are just kind of meant to be defensive coordinators, offense coordinators, what have you. Leslie Frazier, he's kind of had a taste of head coaching. I don't know if I would give him another head coaching gig, especially, at 61 years old, when you can find younger guys who would probably be better suited for the job. Speaking of a younger guy, or at least a little bit younger, Dennis Allen, 48 years old. Dennis Allen was a head coach. We mentioned it before. He was with the Raiders from 2012 to 2014. He was originally the defensive coordinator for the Broncos and actually was with the Saints as a secondary coach and an assistant defensive line coach. And even before that, he was with the Falcons, Tulsa, and Texas A&M. Well, after the Raiders kind of blew up in flames, he went back to the Saints, defensive assistant in 2015, again, trying to build up that stock, build up the stock enough to become the defensive coordinator, and he's been the defensive coordinator since 2015. He's 8-28 all time as a head coach, but I also feel like he might have just been too early. I think he's talented, and I think obviously if he's been the defensive coordinator since 2015, he's well respected among this team. Now, the question is, would they consider ever making him the head coach over Sean Payton? Is this somebody that waits and then takes over for a retiring Sean Payton someday? Who knows? Now, I'm not saying that he is the best, because I don't think he is. But I think he's a solid option and a guy that I honestly could say, very similar to Josh McDaniels, deserves a second chance. So with that being said, we've done the offensive coordinators, we've done the defensive coordinators. Now we move on to the other ends, and this is kind of miscellaneous. This is going to have guys like Doug Peterson, who was just fired, Marvin Lewis, Jim Caldwell, Urban Meyer. So we'll go through it. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. He's been around a little bit as a coach, Calvary Baptist Academy head coach. Then he goes to the Eagles as the offensive quality control coordinator, quarterbacks coach. He's back with Andy Reid as the offensive coordinator, follows Andy Reid to the Chiefs, and then he becomes the head coach in 2016. Wins the Super Bowl the next year. So Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl in 2017. He finished with 42, 37-1 record, 4-2 in the postseason, and he's out of a job. Now, there's a good chance Doug Peterson's going to take some time off, the 52-year-old. But if he doesn't, I think he definitely could get another job. I don't think Doug Peterson is bad enough to not have a job. I didn't like the fit with Doug Peterson and the Eagles any longer. This is probably good for both parties, if you ask me. And the whole tanking at the end of that game probably is what did him in. Moving on, Marvin Lewis. And look, I respect Marvin Lewis. He's been around the game for a while, 62 years old. He's the co-defense coordinator at Arizona State, coaching for Herm Edwards. He's 131 and 122-3, so he's got a plus 500 record, but he's 0-7 in the postseason. I think that's a problem. It's not something that's gotten any better. As a coach, he went from Idaho State to Long Beach State to New Mexico to Pittsburgh to the Pittsburgh Steelers as the linebackers coach from 92 to 95. Defense coordinator for the Ravens from 96 to 2001. Then he went to the Redskins as an assistant head coach and defense coordinator in 2002. And then was the Bengals head coach from 2003 to 2018. He was then fired and went to Arizona State as a special advisor. And this year he became a co-defensive coordinator. His name is generating a ton of buzz. People are not done with him. Marvin Lewis was consistent. I mean, he starts off 8-8, 8-8, 11-5, 8-8, 7-9, 4-11-1 is not very good. 10-6, 4-12 is not good, but then 9-7, 10-6, 11-5, 10-5-1, 12-4, 6-9-1, 7-9, 6-10. Is he maybe the guy to roll with if you're looking for stability? I would still say no. Marvin Lewis will probably get a job at the NFL, but there are only 7 spots, and I feel like I've named 7 better coaching candidates, and I'm still not done. I don't know about you, but maybe Marvin Lewis should stick to college and get a head coaching job in college before going back to the NFL. Might be a little too early, but then again, teams have proven in the past to be a little bit out there. Here's a guy that may have been given the raw deal, and that is 62-50 Jim Caldwell. 2-4 in the postseason, sure. But this is somebody that has been pretty good. When you look at his coaching career, I don't think of this guy as somebody that has totally failed. I don't. And as a matter of fact, I feel like he's kind of been underrated in a sense. Now, his head coaching career, 14-2 his first year with Indy, 10-6 his second year with Indy. They go 2-14 after Peyton Manning has a serious neck injury, and then he's fired. Goes to Detroit, 11-5. They go 7-9 the next year, 9-7 the next year, and then 9-7 again. He gets fired. To me, I don't know if that is deserving of getting fired, especially with the Lions, who really haven't been all that successful. So, interestingly enough, Jim Caldwell led the Lions to 2 playoff games in his tenure. They haven't really been much of a playoff team since. He led the Colts to 2 playoff games in his tenure. He actually lost a Super Bowl to the Saints his first year as head coach, 14-2. The next year he lost to the Jets in the AFC wild card at 10-6. And then the next year he didn't have Peyton Manning. He pretty much trotted out Curtis Painter. So, did Jim Caldwell get a raw deal? Is it surprising that he somehow ended up being a head coach anyway since of his Wake Forest days, going 26-63? Maybe, but he earned it. Wake Forest, he was the head coach from 93 to 2000. Then he goes to Tampa Bay as a quarterback's coach. Then he goes to Indianapolis from 2002 to 2008 as an assistant head coach and a quarterback's coach, helping out Tony Dungy. He takes over for Tony Dungy as the head coach from 2009 to 2011. He becomes the quarterback coach for the Ravens. Eventually the offense coordinator, goes to the Lions, and then Miami. In 2019, he was the assistant head coach and quarterback's coach. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and I feel like he's relatively disrespected. Jim Caldwell doesn't show up as the brightest personality. He is not super charismatic, so to speak, but he gives you results. 65 years old, if you want a guy who's a no-nonsense type of guy, Jim Caldwell might not be a bad hire. Might be good for a Jets team that's trying to add stability. I like him more than Marvin Lewis. So, interestingly enough, we move on. We have Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's been all over the news waves as the likely source to take over the head coaching gig in Duval, a.k.a. the Jacksonville Jaguars job. Urban Meyer, right now, he is the assistant athletics director at Ohio State. He was the head coach. Ryan Day is now the head coach. So, interestingly enough, he's 187-32. He's 12-3 in bowl games and 2-1 in tournaments, aka the college football playoff. He has 3 national titles, 3 Big Ten championships, 2 SEC championships, 2 Mountain West championships, 5 Big Ten East Division championships, 2 Big Ten Leaders Division championships, and 3 SEC Eastern Division championships. With all that, he has a myriad of trophies, and he's actually never been in the NFL before as a coach. Crazy enough, he went from St. Xavier High School to Ohio State, Georgia, to Illinois State, to Illinois State as the quarterback coach, wide receiver coach. Colorado State, Notre Dame, Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State, and that is that. So if Urban Meyer at 58 years old, 56 years old, wants to go to Jacksonville and coach Trevor Lawrence, by all means, I don't have a problem with that. Would I hire Urban Meyer? Probably not. There are other coaches that I prefer that have been in the NFL, and I'm not worried about that. That transition's not guaranteed. But one thing that is very interesting, when you hire Urban Meyer, you have to think about the package deal you're getting. All of those coachings, all those connections that he has established. You have to keep that in mind. This is a well-connected coach. He has been through it all. So definitely an interesting thing there. And we're likely talking about the Jaguars' next head coach from what I've been seeing. But moving on, we have to keep it in college, right? Pat Fitzgerald. I mean, what can you say about the guy? 106-81 at Northwestern. He's 46 years old. And teams have been trying to get him out of college football for a while. He's a college football Hall of Famer. Pat Fitzgerald has done a nice job of really bringing Northwestern to the promised land. And this past year was no different. Now, people are waiting to see if he'll actually take the leap. Quite honestly, he has a ton of interest and he can literally leave whenever he wants. But it's not a guarantee. And while the Lions, well, they like Robert Saleh, although there was a report that he didn't interview very well, they're very interested in Pat Fitzgerald. This is somebody that, he's 5 in bowl games. He's 46 years old. They're a consistent winner. 2 Big Ten West Division championships. Now, Pat Fitzgerald is kind of along the lines of, your college coach that may not be winning national titles, but everyone that knows what they're talking about can see that this guy's better than given credit for. I mean, 2019 wasn't the best year at 3-9, but besides that, if you take that away, from 2006 on, we have 4-8, 6-6, 9-4, 8-5, 7-6, 6-7, 10-3, 5-7, 5-7, 10-3, 7-6, 10-3, 9-5, 3-9, and 7-2. Again, there's some drop-offs there, but you have to keep in mind Northwestern isn't getting the Ohio State recruiting class. They're Northwestern. They're just not doing that. He's widely regarded as a coach that comes in and gets the most out of his players. And for that reason, you got to give him all the credit in the world. Is Pat Fitzgerald finally going to be head coach in the NFL? Is he finally going to leave? Who knows? But he has a really nice setup at Northwestern. He's considered royalty there. They're all very, very, they like him. Moving on is another guy that is coming out of college, and that is Matt Campbell. We don't know if he's actually going to make the jump, but the Jets reportedly love him. Iowa State, 35-28. This is somebody that, has really done a nice job of, stopping Big 12 offenses that, like to really test deep down the field. The Big 12 is known for no defense, but he's actually done a nice job, for the most part, of kind of adapting to that. They went 9-3 this year. They've continued to improve. 3-9 his first year at Iowa State. 8-5 the next year, 8-5 the year after, 7-6 the year after, and 9-3. He's 70-43. He was 35-15 at Toledo. His last 2 seasons at Toledo combined 18-6 record. Matt Campbell's legit. A lot of people think that he is guaranteed to go to the NFL and do well. Now, he was named the coach for Iowa State in 2015. He replaced Paul Rhodes, signed a 6-year, $22.5 million deal. Now, he was named the Big 12 Coach of the Year twice. And again, like I said, in his second year, 8-5 season. They beat number 3 Oklahoma and number 4 TCU. They won their bowl game against Memphis. And then he led Iowa State to another 8-5 season. They went 6-3 in the Big 12. And it's the most conference wins in Iowa State history. So, back in 2018, the Jets were interested when they decided to settle with Adam Gase. They were interested in Campbell. He turned him down. He said, no, I'm staying. Does he stay this time, though? Matt Campbell would be a huge addition to any team. The problem is, so would a guy like Lincoln Riley. It's just when you get an opportunity at a Big 12 school like that, and you're considered royalty, it's hard to go to the NFL and risk it all. I wouldn't put faith in Matt Campbell being an NFL coach because I wouldn't put faith in him leaving Iowa State just yet. Give him a few years and he might. But I don't know if that's the case right now. Chris Richard. Well, I really feel for this guy because at the end of the day, Chris Richard probably should have been a head coach a while ago. He followed Pete Carroll over to Seattle, former USC graduate assistant when with Pete Carroll. Defensive backs coach, cornerbacks coach, defensive backs coach, defensive coordinator in 2015 through 2017, won a Super Bowl with the Legion of Boom, Seattle Seahawks. Then he goes to the Cowboys and, well, he kind of, not that he gets exposed, but the Cowboys kind of made him look worse than he was. So what's the deal with Chris Richard? Dallas didn't retain him. And he sits here without a job. Well, Chris Richard could be an interesting option for head coach, as crazy as that sounds. He's 41 years old. Richard Sherman swears by him. I feel like he did some good things. Obviously, I think he's done a great job with Byron Jones, who's no longer there. I think he really helped Byron Jones out. I think he helped guys like Byron Maxwell out, Brandon Browner. I don't think he gets enough credit. He at least deserves another defensive coordinator gig. But I wouldn't mind if a team went ballsy and decided to hire him. Moving on to another guy that we've heard for years. He's been interviewed a lot, and he just has never been a head coach, and that is Terrell Austin. Terrell Austin's 55 years old. He's the senior defensive assistant and secondary coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's from Pittsburgh. He played player with the Montreal Machine. As a coach, Penn State, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Michigan, Seattle, Arizona, Florida, Ravens, Lions, Bengals, and Steelers. He was the defensive coordinator for the Lions. He was the defensive coordinator for the Bengals. He's done some nice work with the Steelers, and there is a question whether or not that he could end up being a head coach. He's been interviewed for it before, and we'll see where that goes now. On to another guy. This is another defensive backs coach, and this is Aaron Glenn. If you remember Aaron Glenn, he retired in 2008 as a New Orleans Saints corner. 1994, picked 12th overall. Played for the Jets, the Texans, the Cowboys, the Jaguars. He's 48 years old. He coached with the Browns from 2014 to 2015, and ever since 2016, he's actually been with the Saints. So, Aaron Glenn is actually getting some buzz as a head coach, going straight from a defensive backs coach to a head coach. He's widely respected among the Saints organization, and I wouldn't be surprised if they try to promote him from within to maybe make him the defensive coordinator if, say, Dennis Allen leaves. However, if he has his eyes set on the head coaching gig, it's obviously going to give him the advantage there. Moving on, we have Mike Kafka. Now, if you remember him, he was playing football in 2015. So he's relatively new I mean, like, you've seen him pretty recently. 33 years old, quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. He played for the Eagles, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Buccaneers, the Vikings, the Titans, the Bengals. And yes, he was with Andy Reid in Philly. So, of course, Andy Reid brought him over because if you make a connection with Andy Reid's going to try to get you involved in his coaching staff. So, the way I see it, Mike Kafka is getting some buzz now as a head coach. He might have to start as an OC, especially since Eric Bieniemy on that team is the OC. But there could be a team pressing for the next Sean McVay at 33 years old, quarterback coach on the Chiefs. Mike Kafka could get the nod. That remains to be seen, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Another quarterback coach to watch out for. He's 47 years old. He's James Urban, and he is the quarterback coach in Baltimore from 2018 on. He's been the quarterback coach for Lamar Jackson, and he is definitely somebody that at some point or another is going to get at least an offensive coordinator job. The thing that Urban was hired to do, and he was hired before they drafted Lamar Jackson, but he helped Lamar Jackson's delivery and footwork, and he really helped him get acclimated to the NFL. Without James Urban, Lamar Jackson may not be what Lamar Jackson is today. I'm coming out of the draft. He was my number one overall quarterback. But to say James Urban didn't help him out, that would be a stretch. Dave Taub. How many times have we talked about Dave Taub every single offseason? Special teams coordinator for the Chiefs. This guy's always around the head coaching realm, but he never gets an opportunity. He played for the Eagles and the Rams in the 80s as a 9th round pick out of UTEP in 85. He's coached Texas at El Paso. He's coached Mizzou. He's coached the Philadelphia Eagles special teams, the Bears, the Chiefs. He was named the assistant head coach in 2018, but he's actually been the special teams coordinator from 2013 to now. He's a Super Bowl champion, as everyone knows, and Taub is somebody that you'd have to imagine at some point someone's going to hire him. He's one of the best special teams coordinators in all of football. He actually interviewed in 2012 for the Bears head coaching position after they fired Lovie Smith. They ended up hiring Mark Trestman, and Taub was not able to get that job. So it is interesting. Will he ever get a head coaching gig? I don't know. He is 58 years old. It is definitely something that he's well respected, but I think the Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan success, and now Kevin Stefanski, will have people trying to press and find their next guy that's an offensive mind. Fortunately, that doesn't help Taub. What does help Taub is the fact that special teams coordinator John Harbaugh has done wonders with the Baltimore Ravens after being hired as a special teams coordinator. Interestingly enough, it does go to show you not everything has to go offense or defense. Tony Elliott. You may have heard him. He wasn't able to coach in the Clemson game, I believe, due to COVID. Offensive coordinator and running backs coach. Tony Elliott is very well respected. He is actually going to be losing his co-offensive coordinator, Jeff Scott, who did end up accepting a head coaching position with South Florida. So he is now the sole offensive coordinator. But could Tony Elliott leave and be a head coach in the NFL? Maybe we're a year early, but it's a name to watch out for. Obviously, he's had success at Clemson since 2011. 41 years old. Well, here's another one for you. College we'll stick with. Graham Harrell. That name sound familiar? Well, it should. Graham Harrell. He's with USC. Offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. He was with North Texas. He was with Washington State. He was with Oklahoma State. But Graham Harrell is mostly known for, as an undrafted rookie free agent at Texas Tech, for putting up ridiculous numbers in college. And by ridiculous numbers, I mean setting records. Quite frankly, he and Michael Crabtree tore up the league. He threw 38 touchdowns and 4,555 yards, which is the third most for a sophomore in Division I football history. It's the most for a sophomore in Big 12 history. Now, he had wide receivers, Danny Amendola, and of course, as I mentioned, Michael Crabtree. But Harrell could not be stopped. He threw for 5,705 yards and 48 touchdowns in his junior season. In his senior season, he had some incredible games and actually ended up finishing his career with 12,709 yards. Pretty incredible what he was able to do. So, what ends up happening is that he doesn't end up really living up to the hype. And of course, he was an undrafted free agent, so there wasn't really much hype. Obviously, his college stats were the hype. But he decides to go into coaching, and he's somebody that I believe Sean McVay actually went after in the offseason trying to bring him, but he decided to go with USC as the offensive coordinator. And there's a good chance he might leave USC at some point. And Graham Harrell is definitely somebody to watch out for as somebody that could jump to the NFL and what he's done for Keaton Slovis. Interestingly enough, we have another college coach. This one's a head coach. This one's been mentioned by me before. It is David Shaw. Shaw is 90-36 as the Stanford head coach. He's been the head coach there since 2011. He's been with Stanford since 2007. He's 5-3 in bowl games. He has 3 Pac-12 championships. He has 5 Pac-12 North Division championships. He's been a 4-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year. And at the end of the day, he's done wonders for Stanford. Now, things haven't really been as great as they were, and I do wonder if he could make the jump to the NFL. He's well respected. He comes from Stanford. He obviously has done a great job. He has a huge track record of putting, very talented and productive players into the league. It makes me wonder if he would indeed come to the NFL. He was last seen with the Baltimore Ravens as a wide receiver coach in 2005. Could he come back to the NFL as a head coach? That remains to be seen. Interestingly enough, though, he's worked with quarterbacks such as, well, all you really need to know is that he worked with Andrew Luck. So, could he end up working with, and albeit it was a year, but could he end up working with a guy like Justin Herbert? I think that fit in LA might be an interesting fit. Very talented coach. We'll see if he ever moves over. Deuce Staley is another one. Eagles assistant head coach. The thing about Deuce Staley, and he played for the Eagles and Steelers in his career. He's been an Eagles coach his whole career. Special teams quality control from 2011 to 2012. Running backs coach from 2013 to 2017. He's still the running backs coach, but they added that assistant coach title on him in 2018 through now. He's a Super Bowl champion as a player and a coach, and he's very much well respected, not only around the league, not only around his team, but the fans love him. Deuce Staley, of course. Now, here's the interesting thing with Deuce Staley. He has his own drill, which they now call the Deuce Staley drill, and they use it at the NFL Combine to enhance players' footwork. But that's not really the interesting thing. The interesting thing here is that, well, basically, Staley was the one that had to be the head coach when Doug Peterson was diagnosed with COVID-19. Now, Peterson wasn't gone long. He was gone about 10 days, and it wasn't even when the season started. But he did have to take over the reins, very interestingly enough. I don't see Deuce Staley being hired by another team, but I could see Deuce Staley being promoted from within and being the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. It would definitely be an interesting thing there, and he's definitely trending in the right direction. We got two more for you. Harold Goodwin, Buccaneers assistant head coach and run game coordinator. You may know him as the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals from 2013 to 2017. Harold Goodwin got some interviews, but at the end of the day, he was not named a head coach. He did, however, follow Bruce Arians over from Arizona to Tampa Bay, and he's done a nice job. Will he be a head coach? He's gotten interviews before. His name's out there. He could be kind of your dark horse that no one sees coming. Super Bowl champion and national champion in his own right. I'm very interested to see if he ends up being a head coach for sure. So the last guy, before we get to our honorable mentions, is Jim Leonhard. Jim Leonhard's probably somebody you know because he wasn't playing long. 2014, he played for the Browns. He was with the Bills, the Ravens, the Jets, the Broncos, the Saints, the Bills, and the Browns. Well, in 2016, he decided to become the defensive backs coach for Wisconsin. In 2017, he became the defensive coordinator for Wisconsin. The 38-year-old Jim Leonhard is an intriguing option here. Now, Jim Leonhard kind of fits the bill in a sense, looking for the next Sean McVay. You know, you want to get a young guy. And it's honestly very similar to Brandon Staley. Now, if you remember Jim Leonhard during the offseason, if you're a Rams fan, the Rams had interest in Jim Leonhard being the defensive coordinator. The Rams ultimately went with Staley in the Fangio defense. They felt like that was the best fit. But the Rams really had interest, and Sean McVay really had interest in his coaching search for defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard. Long term, this could be huge for Jim Leonhard. His third season was finished last season with the Badgers defense. Fourth season as a college coach. And Sean McVay was already reaching out to him to potentially be a defensive coordinator for his team. What's interesting, very interesting here, is that if Brandon Staley ends up leaving, Jim Leonhard could end up taking over as defensive coordinator for the Rams. But what if Jim Leonhard was actually hired to be a head coach? What if Brandon Staley changes the way things are done? People see his success and decide they want to make him their head coach. Definitely interesting, is it not? I think it is. So those are the options, and we went through a bunch of them. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Honorable mentions, just to kind of throw them out there for future coordinators and maybe potential head coaches down the line. D'Amico Ryans, as I mentioned, 49ers inside linebackers coach. Chris Kokurik, 49ers defensive line coach. Shane Waldron, Rams passing game coordinator. Aubrey Pleasant, Rams cornerbacks coach. Joe Barry, Rams assistant head coach and linebackers coach. Chris Shula, Rams outside linebackers coach. Eric Henderson, Rams defensive line coach. Matt Canada, Steelers quarterback coach, and Todd Downing, Titans tight end coach. Vacancies again, Jaguars, Chargers, Jets, Falcons, Lions, Texans, and Eagles. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. If you guys have any questions about any sort of coach that I didn't cover, let me know. If you have any suggestions about a coach that I didn't cover, let me know. Let's have some fun with this. And next time, you're talking with your buddies and, they're asking you about, what you think about a certain coach. Well, if you hear this, take some stuff that I said and, show off your knowledge. I mean, that's what it's all about. So looking forward to seeing this coaching carousel and what ends up happening. But as always, if you like what you see and hear, be sure to subscribe and drop a like. Take care, guys.